messing around, and we are.
Yeah, okay. We're live.
Oh dear God. Well then, um, let's get started because we've messed around enough. Why not
Yeah, yeah,
actually talk about stuff and maybe produce an interesting and entertaining podcast?
yeah. Those are all things that we probably want to do.
Those are our goals.
Those are our goals. Yeah.
So, welcome to the Code and Supply initial podcast. We have myself, Justin Reese, and Alex Shenoy here, and
Yep.
we're just gonna talk about some stuff. Um,
Just whatever pops into our heads at the time.
Whatever pops into our heads. We've actually made a nice little list beforehand, so it's not going to be completely disorganized, but mostly disorganized. Um, and hopefully it'll be disorganized in a charming way and not in an annoying way.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
it is our goal to break the YouTube hit counter. That's a goal that we have.
yes, we're the next side because
Yeah.
that's actually something we should talk about because that's kind of a hilarious programming problem. Um, but yeah, Psy broke the YouTube hit counter because his video was more than 32 bits viewed, right?
That's how the story goes. I'm not. I don't know the specifics. I just read the headline and was like, all right, file that away for something to look up if I ever care.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. But we'll talk about things like this, talk about programming problems, programming solutions, um,
And
today's
code and supply.
and code and supply.
So for
Um,
people that don't know, we should probably give an introduction of code and supply.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Um, so, code and supply is a local programming community in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Um, Hopefully, people will listen to this or watch this podcast from outside of Pittsburgh because we're going to try to appeal to everyone. But what we do is we hold about 6 events each month focused on programming in general. We have a nice focus on emerging languages like Go and Elixir, um, clojure, and also a nice focus on things that are abnormal to programming, such as like programming and journalism, just trying to find the most interesting topics we can. We just had our end of year party this week. It was a lot of fun. We celebrated 600 members in our first year, first 8 months, really. Um, and it's gaining steam, and we're going to keep it going. We're going to keep trying new things like this here podcast.
Yeah.
Alex is a faithful member. I am the founder of Code and Supply, and we have a great group of people that help make it happen. So
Yeah, it's great. And the events are held at sponsored locations usually. It's been typically IBM, I think, but I think you've had events at other places too. So,
yeah, we have great sponsors that help us hold things, and IBM's been incredible to us, helping us host events. And Bruce Adams and Colin Dean from IBM have been very, very important factors in the success of Code and Supply because their efforts of their time is just as important as IBM's effort of their space and money.
yeah, definitely. So Code and Supply is an awesome organization. The events are really great. It's a great community of people. And so we're hoping to cover topics on the podcast that appeal to that group of people, but also people that maybe aren't in Code and Supply yet, and this might be a good avenue for them to enter and get to know the group. What's our first topic? It's going to be
Well, not exactly a topic, but we have a theme for
a
this
theme.
episode,
Theme. Yeah.
um, and it's a semi-ironic theme of is creating new things good. Like, should we be doing this podcast? Aren't there enough
Yeah.
podcasts? Things like that. But really, what inspired this was your link to the article called "Code of Ages."
Yeah. Um, So Code of Ages is an article that's on Medium. It's I don't remember who wrote it. Give me 1 second. I can find out. It's a user called Backchannel. It's Scott Rosenberg wrote this article, a great article about Go and Swift, and why the languages were created and what problems they solve. And so Go is Google's server-side programming language, and it solves a lot of googly problems. Problems that you have when you have the scale that Google has, things like concurrency, and Go is specifically designed to handle those types of tasks. And Swift is the other language that he talks about, and Swift is obviously the new iOS language. Well, the new Apple language. I guess you can write Mac apps too, but it's basically the language that Apple is hoping will get more developers on the iOS platform and make it easier for people to pick up the iOS platform and live inside of their ecosystems. So the question is, should these languages have been created? What was the onus for creating these languages? And really, when you hear a lot of people, and I've heard this said about Swift, and I've heard it said about Go, and when you talk about these languages, a lot of people are like, why are you creating this language? Or why are you're reinventing the wheel? Why don't you just make Python better? Or why don't you just work to make better C compilers or something along those lines? And why couldn't Apple just patch Objective-C to make it work well? And really, so my sort of take on this is that at some point you have to cut your losses with a language, and more languages is not necessarily a bad thing. I think a lot of people have this stigma around wasting effort, but I don't think it's wasted effort. I think that we all want better tools and better languages and better abstractions, and we want to find better ways to do the thing that we love doing, and these languages help that front. So that's kind of where Code of Ages fits into this.
Yeah, and what you touched on a point that I'm trying to play the devil's advocate, and because I know your position on this is new things are good, and
Yeah.
I largely agree that new things are good. Otherwise, I wouldn't be leading this code and supply community
Right.
that focuses on a lot of new languages. But playing devil's advocate, like, why isn't there like one language that we're all trying to help shape to be better, or not one, that would be probably too hard to address everything with, but why didn't Google just make Python better? And why did they need to create their own thing?
I think so. Python has a number of there's a number of issues with why they didn't just make Python better. I mean, Python is you're running it inside of a VM. They wanted a systems language. They wanted a language that compiled down to the metal. They really wanted it to be concurrent. They wanted to be able to do things easily, right? So they created a new language where the constructs allow them to do the things that they want to do, and it allows them to do them efficiently. So that if you need that kind of concurrency, you can use Go to get that. The same thing. It's kind of a similar thing. Like, why didn't Apple just buy RubyMotion and make RubyMotion the preferred Apple developer language? And I think that the answer there too is Apple has a particular set of goals and a particular set of constraints that they have to work in, and taking a language like Ruby and using it that way is one, it's just not their style, and two, I think that in order to do that, they would have had to have given up some measure of control for how things like Swift does a really good job of linking into old Objective-C libraries, and you just create a bridging header and you can use all of the old Objective-C libraries. You can create new Swift files within an old Objective-C project, and it does a lot of that kind of stuff really well. Now, you can do that in RubyMotion too. I mean, you have access to all of the Cocoa pods in RubyMotion, but this is a way for Apple to sort of control the language and the future of their platform. And I think the same is true for Go. Go is actually, it is an open source project. It's not just Google working on it anymore. But I think the reason that these languages come out is because you have a certain set of constraints, and those constraints you have one or two people that are working at a company or working somewhere, and they have these constraints and they need to design within them. And that's why patching Python to make it work, you know, it's probably not the best way to approach the problem, because Python might not be able to support the constraints that you have.
Yeah, and this article really talked about it. It brought up Hack by Facebook, their PHP, offshoot, and it also, but it really focused on Go and Swift. But something that I felt the article didn't do all that much was kind of state the different reasons between the two. Um, like Google created Go to be faster. They wanted something that would be more performant within their environment. And it seems like Swift, the motivation there was a little different. It was almost like to get more people developing for Objective-C and make a nice, or not Objective-C, for iOS, and make a nicer way to code. So it's really two different motivations between creating a new programming language. Um, Google's was Python isn't good enough um, for our systems, which is a very googly thing to say. And
Yeah,
Apple's was uh, our Objective-C isn't a beautiful enough language, which is a very Apple thing to say.
yeah,
So it's very interesting how they like the reasons for creating those new languages.
yeah. And I think Swift, like Apple needed Swift, right? That there, I don't think there's a single person that thinks that if Apple, uh, I don't think there's anybody that thinks that Objective-C is a good language, or that, I mean, maybe there's some diehard Objective-C people out there, but I think a lot of people, like even Apple diehards, admit that Apple needed a language that, people are coming out of school and they're expecting, they're expecting nicer languages. They're learning nicer languages, and they're learning more modern languages that have a lot of features. And not that Objective-C doesn't have features, and not that the Objective-C runtime didn't have a lot of features, but the syntax for Objective-C is just really weird if you're coming from any other language. It's you can pick it up, and you can pick it up kind of quickly, but when you first look at it, it doesn't look like any other language, right?
Right. I've had a job where I've done Ruby and Objective-C, and that's hard. It's like it's hard
Yeah,
to
yeah,
switch
oh yeah,
between the two because one's just so verbose and one is so much like pseudocode that you can. It's just it feels even heavier compared to what's out there now, what's popular now.
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting that you bring up Ruby, because one of the other things that I wanted to bring up was there's the keynote from RubyCon 2012, I believe, where Matz gives this talk about reinventing wheels, and he basically says, like, I did this because I wanted to do it, and I wanted to reinvent. I wanted to make a language. That's what I wanted to do, and this is the language that I created, and it's kind of a replacement for Perl, and here you go. But in the talk, he's basically saying, like, creating new things is not bad, and it's a good thing for us to do. Experimentation helps us, and I think that creating Go is going to help Python or become a better language, right? Like, Python is getting faster. And there's different implementations of Python. So maybe you could make the argument that Google could have made a version of the Python syntax that's still compiled down to machine code, but um, would that really be Python? Like, probably not.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, and the one thing that I really got out of that Matt's talk um, is kind of like it helped me notice that not many languages these days that are popular kind of started as a project of passion. Um, that the Code of Ages article points out that Fortran, COBOL, C Sharp, Java, um, those all came from big companies that needed something like a Swift and a Go, something that fit their needs.
right.
And then there's also Erlang, which is another one. These languages created by big, giant, either corporations or groups, um, but there's not much like Matt's passion project of Ruby, where he just wanted to code better and be happy while he was doing it. Um, it's I tried to think of some other examples. I think maybe Clojure is written by Ritiki.
Yeah.
And I looked
It's kind
into,
of the only one that I can think of. Like
yeah,
Clojure is probably the last language where somebody said, you know what, I want to make a language that speaks to the type of programming that I want to do, and it's going to work using the abstractions that I want. It's going to be functional, and it's going to be Lispy, and it's going to be, that's kind of the last language that I can think of that was made by somebody saying, I want a language like this, and I'm going to go create it.
well, the last successful one, because you see these
Last
ones all the
successful one.
time.
Yeah, yeah.
People are, I want to write a language is kind of like the new thing to do almost for some people.
Yeah.
But like very, very, very rarely do they make it to the level of Mets and Ruby. And it also led me to look into like the origins of Python and all of that. And it looks like Python was started by a pretty large organization or a research institute to solve a completely different problem than it is today.
Yeah.
It was meant to interact with the Amoeba files, the Amoeba operating system, I believe. Uh, I actually don't even know what that is. Uh, so who knows what
Yeah.
who knows where these languages that are being created, Go and Swift, who knows where they'll end up being popular in 15 years, like
Right.
Python.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree. We've talked about this before. Like, I am definitely on the side of like let everyone create their own language. Like, that we'll decide which ones we want to work on and which ones we like. But ultimately, research, like all of that research that people do into making their own languages and coming up with new design paradigms and new design patterns and new abstractions and coming up with new frameworks, all of that stuff. Like, what if, like, what if David Heinemeier Hansson had said, you know what, I'm just going to use Perl or I'm going to use PHP because that's good enough for me, and I don't need to use this toy language Ruby. Like, what if he had said that, right? Rails wouldn't be a thing. And Rails is a great framework, like probably the best web framework.
And you got to think of Rails almost single-handedly led to a pretty big boom in web applications as companies. So
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it's definitely inspired a lot of people to get into programming. And yeah, if it wasn't for picking up this toy language Ruby, who knows where we'd be
yeah.
right now.
All because one guy just wanted to have fun while he was programming, and I think that's kind of a good thing too.
But is it? Because I think you know where I'm going to go with this. What about like Arnold C and Walter?
So Arnold C is the language of the future, and if you're listening to this podcast and you have not looked at Arnold C, you need to. I think you should go to your organization, your company, or whatever, and force them to change all of their projects over to Arnold C. It's probably the best language to happen in many, many years.
Let's see.
And I'm being completely sarcastic. So what's Arnold C? Why don't we tell people what Arnold C is?
Well, let's just read from the README on GitHub. Arnold C is a programming language based on the one-liners of Arnold Schwarzenegger. So, hello world in C, Arnold C is hello world.arnold C. That's the file extension they suggest.
You have to read it in your best Arnold Schwarzenegger impression voice.
Oh, I don't know if I want to do that. All right. I'll do it
You'll do it.
because
If you don't do it, I'll do it.
I'll do it because hopefully it's our first podcast and no one's listening. And wait, we have a viewer. Oh, damn it.
We have a viewer?
Yeah. We have a viewer on the live hangout right now. All right, I'll do my best, Arnold, for this. It's showtime. So I'm gonna guess that's kind of like a program initializer. Uh,
Yeah.
or is that the main of the
I
thing?
think that's main. That's how you declare the main method declaration is it's showtime.
Okay. And then taking the parameter hello world is talk to the hand, which I'm gonna guess is puts or
Yeah, puts or print or something like that, yeah.
I'm not I forget C to really translate this. And then you have been terminated. ends the file, ends the program. So it's really should things like this exist?
Yes, yes, 100% yes, they should exist.
I
I
mean,
mean, it's a joke. This guy, like, I can't imagine that it took this guy more than a weekend to put this thing together. I mean, it's a joke. It's a joke. Jokes are important. I mean, I personally really think that this is hilarious. Like,
you know what? It's great because I bet you he learned a lot. I'll admit, in one of my first jobs, the way I learned Ruby was creating a translator that took a paragraph of text and translated it into the way this one guy talks. He had like this surfer lingo that he used all the time. So in my spare time, I was at this PHP job trying to learn Ruby, and I had this little file on my computer that would take a paragraph and add bro to the end of the sentences. Um, so I mean, doing these experimental kind of things really
yeah.
can do something in weird ways too.
My favorite method in Arnold C is read integer, which is I want to ask you a bunch of questions and I want them answered immediately. It's the greatest, definitely the greatest method in the entire language. I mean, no, so like I go to build nights all the time and I build like the things that I usually build are jokes, right? Like I started building a app to scrape Crunchbase and convert all the monetary amounts from dollars to factors of the amount of money that Microsoft paid for Minecraft. Like that's a joke. It's funny, but it's not like is that useful to anyone? No, not really. Like
But you learned the Crunchbase API.
yeah.
Well, you learned how long it takes to sign up for the Crunchbase API.
Yeah, I learned how long it takes to sign up for the Crunchbase API.
Yeah, and
then I learned that you can't get the acquisitions feed directly, and you have to do a bunch of other stuff to get the acquisitions feed, which is kind of annoying. But that's a whole other topic for another day.
someday we'll have to revisit just the idea of selling things or valuing things in terms of Minecrafts.
I think it's more stable than valuing them in terms of Bitcoin. Oh, snap.
Okay, so to follow up on Code of Ages, you actually wrote an article.
Yeah, I did a while ago, a long time ago.
Blog post article. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and call it an article.
All right, okay. I appreciate that. I think probably I think it's a blog post, but I'll take article. That's a good step up.
But in 2012, you wrote, "Don't tell me I'm reinventing the wheel." Why don't you give a little summary of that?
So yeah, in 2012 I was writing my own sort of blogging platform, and I had a lot of friends that were just like, "Why don't you use WordPress?" And I was like, "Have you seen WordPress? Like it's terrible. WordPress is bad. Like it's got all these features that I don't need. It's just bad. Like all I want is to be able to write Markdown and have it displayed on a screen. Like I don't need comments. I don't need upvoting. I don't need any of this stuff, right? That's all I need." So I was writing this, but I had a lot of friends that were just saying, like, don't reinvent the wheel, just use this thing. And I've sort of been battling this throughout like various stages of my career. So another one is, and these are all in the blog post. There was another one where I was trying to make a forum site for my fraternity in college that basically what I wanted to do is I wanted to take our mailing list and just make it a more centralized thing. And everybody was talking about like I should just use PHPBB. And I was like, but PHPBB it's big. Like it's good. It's a great forum solution, but like all I'm trying to do is like manage these emails that everybody is sending out, right? And basically what the blog post is sort of like a reaction to that. And I'm basically making the argument that one, like when I'm remaking some of this stuff, like the wheels that they don't want me to reinvent are terrible, like they suck. WordPress is, it's a full-blown content management system. It's way more complicated than I think you need for just a simple blog. Another one that I talk about is TinyMCE. Like, I don't know a single person that uses TinyMCE and actually likes it. Like, it's terrible, right? As a WYSIWYG, like whenever you put in stylized text, it goes to the database in these spans, right? With spans with inline styling, and it's just bad. Like, it's not it. You don't want to represent your data like that in the database, and I don't understand why people think that that's a good thing. I don't know. I don't understand why the tiny MCE guys think that that's a good thing. Not to call them out, but you guys need to figure out a better data model.
Let's not call out enemies. Let's not create enemies of the show already.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I
But
mean,
no, so like the point was that, like, the tools that I am creating are tools that, like, one, they're things that I want to learn. So, for example, the WYSIWYG editor, I wanted to learn the Canvas API for HTML5, and I thought that that was a good way to do it because I could learn the HTML5 Canvas APIs. I could make a WYSIWYG editor that used the formatting that I wanted it to use, and then I could, eventually publish it, which I never did, but because Ghost came out, and then I was like, oh, this is exactly what I wanted to have. So there's that. But I guess it comes from this place where people think that, like, oh, this thing that is out there is good enough, and it might be good enough, but maybe you could create something better, right? And there are definitely side benefits, fringe benefits to even when you see something, like when you go to create it, you'll figure out, like, why maybe you think that something doesn't make sense in an implementation for something, and maybe when you're creating it, you'll figure out why they chose that. Like what reasons they had or what constraints they had that forced that decision. So my blog post is really just a reaction to that, to this sort of, it's good enough, don't reinvent the wheel, don't create new, just like pick something off the shelf and use that. And my argument is, if I don't like what's on the shelf, then I should make my own thing.
yeah, and this conversation inspired me to open the Wikipedia article on the wheel. Um, you know what? People did reinvent the wheel because the first wheel sucked. We're getting better every day. We have tires that are built for winter weather traction. That's reinventing the wheel. That's
Yeah.
that's what you're doing. You're not riding your car on wooden discs like they did a couple hundred years ago, or a metal tire or completely metal wheels. And we've added tires, and we have reinvented the wheel. It's not bad to reinvent the wheel.
No, it's definitely, and I phrase it this way, right? Like, everybody, a lot of people that I talk to don't want to reinvent, like, you shouldn't reinvent the wheel, but I think that everyone that I know would like to have a nicer wheel. Like, if Firestone said, we can make a tire for half the price that goes twice as far, so you pay the same amount and you get twice the mileage off of it, like, I'm pretty sure everybody would want, well, maybe not Firestone, but I'm pretty sure people would want that, right? Like, that's a thing that people would want.
I'm sure that there's some engineer at Firestone or Goodyear, and their title is
wheel reinventor.
wheel reinventor. If I would have that on my business card, if I were an engineer in the tire department at these places.
Yeah, that's really that's impressive. That's a business card you should definitely. I might just get a business card that says wheel reinventor, just to have it. Like,
yeah, I think a lot of people would appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I think something that your article does a great job of is, like, espousing the side effects the benefits that you get from creating something new. Every time you do every time that you reinvent that wheel, you're learning something about how that wheel was built in the first place, and you can take it further.
Yeah, and you get domain knowledge about the problem that library or application is solving, right? So there's things specific to blogging that is domain knowledge for that, and how you handle that I didn't have, right? Like, and how you represent data and in a good way, and what the best gem is to render markdown into HTML, and what to do if the gem doesn't support something. Like, there's domain knowledge there that's and that's a really simple example, but you could easily see how, like, a more complicated thing like a task scheduling gem or something, if you created a new one, you could easily see how that would give you domain knowledge about task scheduling that you could then apply to other things.
And you also never know what kind of benefits you'll come out with. Like you said, there are dependencies on creating a blogging system, and maybe one of those dependencies is kind of bad. Like maybe there's no good Markdown parser. There is, but you know,
But yeah, yeah, as an
upper-
example, maybe there's not.
as an example, maybe there's nothing really good out there, and maybe you'll write the good one. So
Yeah,
maybe you won't, you know, invent a better wheel, but you'll invent a better spoke or something.
yeah. Do you want to talk about the web?
Yeah, let's talk about the web. You know what how do you feel about the web?
I think that there's a great talk that is really, really just hits this topic on the head, called "Life is Terrible. Let's Talk About the Web,"
Um,
um,
yeah.
which is a video that we both watched. It's kind of a rant. It's a well, you found the thing, you sent it to me, so you sort of introduce it.
Sure. I mean, it's just another yet another talk about how life is terrible because we all have to use JavaScript. And it just reminded me of a classic Alex Shenoy rant. It felt great to hear someone say these, and it's probably one of the funnier talks I've seen in a long time.
And
And I think it's important that we let our audience know about this.
yeah, yeah. So in the show notes, I wrote, like, if ever there was a wheel that should be taken to Mount Doom and cast into the fire, it's JavaScript. And then I put like another note that said a wheel is not a ring, but you know what I mean. Um, but that's another. Yeah, yeah, just switching metaphors, whatever. But that's another thing. Like, Google's got Dart. Microsoft has, what is it, TypeScript? It's like a superset of JavaScript, I think, something like that. CoffeeScript compiles down to JavaScript, and it's more of a classy sort of implementation. Classy as in it uses classes, not, not that it's classier. It's
Not that it holds its pinky up when it takes a
yeah,
step.
not that it, like, yeah. But that's another one where, like, yeah, like that. That's another one that's, a language that a lot of people, I think Douglas Crockford has probably the best quote. It's like the only language that people use without learning first, right? I think that's the quote. It's something close to that. But that's a language that a lot of people are trying to, like, get away from having to use JavaScript, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to get too deep into my hatred of JavaScript and turn the show into that, but maybe we can, start a discussion about it someday, and I think we should probably save it though, and
Yeah,
because
yeah. Do it later.
that could be a full episode on the benefits, the cons of, and the world of creating new JavaScript frameworks every week.
Yeah, because there
And
are so many JavaScript frameworks.
yeah, and hey, we found a way to like tie this awesome talk that we just wanted to share back into our theme for the day of
Yeah,
new things.
yeah, yeah. It's a successful first episode, I think.
Yeah,
Do we have anything else that we want to talk about, or is that?
I don't think so. I think that we covered all of our points that we had hoped to cover, and we created a pretty decent, half hour of discussion.
Yeah,
Hopefully, people will be entertained by it, and there will be a reason to create a second one.
yeah, hopefully. Yeah, so I guess we should probably do, like, Twitter handles so people can follow us. And
Yeah, yeah,
so I'm Alex Shenoy on Twitter.
yeah. And I am Justin X Reese, X as in X-ray vision. And
Because that's your superpower. Your superpower is X-ray vision.
no, that's my middle name, X-ray
That's
vision.
your X-ray vision's your middle name.
Yeah,
Oh, you had some sweet parents.
yeah. And also, you should follow at Code and Supply so you can keep
Yeah,
up to date when we'll do our next podcast. Our goal is to do these once a month, I believe, and
yeah.
will typically be me and Alex as hosts. I'll kind of guide Alex. I'll be the host, and Alex will be the color come. And then hopefully next month we'll start bringing on a guest, a third host, to really just make this more of a hangout, a discussion, and get some more viewpoints in here. So
Yep.
I think that's good. And Alex, say goodbye to the people.
Goodbye to the people.
Bye, people.
Bye, people.